Tina Kadolph is the co-founder and president of Love Missions Global, a non-profit organization dedicated to the abolishment of modern-day slavery worldwide. A passionate advocate and educator, Tina has traveled across the US and internationally, sharing her story and teaching human trafficking prevention with a focus on prevention and online safety for youth. Tina's work has been widely recognized. She was nominated Hero of the Year by Spectrum TV and interviewed by CNN for her influence, encouragement, and inspiring leadership. Tina's life mission is to transform personal pain into purpose by protecting vulnerable individuals, educating communities, and preventing human trafficking, ensuring others never endure what she has overcome. In today's episode, Tina will share her powerful and inspirational story. Viewers and listeners' discretion is advised. This episode contains discussions of sensitive topics like rape, human trafficking, domestic violence, and mental health struggles that may be upsetting to some viewers and listeners. Hi, Tina. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for taking out the time and being on Thriving Changes. I so appreciate it. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity. And as this month is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, it's always a good time to share about this subject.
Yeah. No, I think it's so appropriate. I think it just happened.
Yes.
I know that it's a very sensitive topic. You will be sharing your life story of human trafficking,
Mhm.
and it is such a powerful and inspirational story. And I've heard you share your story. Every time I hear it, it still has that same impact. It shakes me up. So I can't even imagine how much it will be for you. So I just want you to know before we start that if at any time you want to take a break, you feel uncomfortable, or it just gets too much, just let me know and we can take a pause.
Okay. Thank you. And yes, it's never easy. But the reason why I share my story is because I hope to bring hope to those that are maybe still in the life or still trying to recover from it and let them know there is hope on the other side.
Yeah, that's so true. And I know that's why you do it. It's a cause that you've been pursuing for a few years. And so let's start with the very beginning. Share with us how it was, what was happening when you were a child.
Yeah. So when I was a child, the environment I lived in seemed very normal to me because it was the life. I didn't know any other life. At the age of 4 is when my mom first allowed a man to rape me. I didn't know at that time, being so small and not understanding exactly what was happening to me. I don't know why, because I was young, just a young child, why my mom allowed that to happen. I don't know the transaction. I don't know those details. All I know is what happened. And when that happened, I had to disassociate in my mind and try to make my mind go somewhere else because the reality of what was happening was so horrific. That continued on throughout my childhood. And it was hard for me to go to school. There was times I went to school, but if I had any effects of the trauma on me, any bruises, anything, I didn't go to school. I had to stay home until those things healed. And so I was in and out of school, not regularly in school. And so a lot of people, I think there were people during that time that knew that something was wrong. They didn't know exactly what was wrong. And back in my time, the word human trafficking also wasn't a word. And so they knew there was probably abuse going on, but nobody stood up and asked questions and looked deeper.
First of all, I'm so sorry. Every time I hear this, I'm just so sorry that you had to go through this. And I can't even imagine the trauma that you must have gone through. My first question that's coming to my mind is that at that time, now we have social services, like teachers are required to report if they suspect an abuse going on. So
Mhm.
at that time, this was not a thing in school?
I feel, again, being a kid, I don't know the details, but teachers that knew that there was something wrong and they would try to make an appointment with my mom to have a parent teacher conference to ask what was going on in my life. But my mom never showed up to those conferences. And so, as far as I know, nobody was called on. I do know a truant officer came to our house at one point because I had missed so much school. Back then, they did do truant officers. I don't even know if they still do that today, but they did have a truant officer come. But what my mom did was just bring him into the house and paid him off with sex. And so he never said anything about what was going on in our house.
That's so heavy. So, till what age did this go on?
It went on until I was about 16, somewhere in there. My mom did remarry. She had been married 5 times. The men that she married were men that, because my mom also was a prostitute, so the men that she married were never healthy, good men, and they never lasted long. And when she married her last husband, the fifth one, was when I was about 15 or 16. And they actually did stay married. At the beginning of that marriage, it was very chaotic and still things that he was not a bad, he was definitely changed our lives and for the good as time went on. But during my young years, because I had been through so much abuse and at that age, I didn't know how to deal with someone coming into our home and staying there. And then he brought 2 younger siblings. There was a lot of still phone calls being made, wanting to make those transactions. And now my mom's saying, we're not going to do that. And still, she was abusive to me. So I ended up running away at 16, thinking that the house that I was in wasn't still safe. And he was in the service and very regimented. And I felt like he was too hard on us. And so I ran away. And from that, just lived on the streets myself. And thinking I could do better for myself, which obviously you can't. And today, when I help talk in schools or wherever I talk, or even to young people, I talk to them about finding a safe place rather than running away from home, thinking that's going to cure what is going on in your home, because it only leaves you more vulnerable to other things, which is exactly what happened to me. I had someone come into my life knowing I needed help, promising me all the things that he would provide a home and take care of me, and life was going to be so much better, and it was exactly the same as at home and maybe even worse.
So, how long did that relationship go on?
I stayed with him until I was 20, 19 or 20, and he ended up being put in jail. He sold drugs and also was very abusive, and then also sexually abusive, and all the things that had happened to me. One night when he was beating me up, he had a gun to my head and said that he was going to kill me, and he was hitting me and had the gun to my head and screaming at me, and the neighbors heard him through the walls, and they called the police. So when they called, the police came in and they took him to jail.
Did you continue staying in that house or did you move?
I did stay in the house. I didn't know where to go. And I really just felt like my life wasn't worth living. And so I had planned on committing suicide. I had all the drugs in the house. And by then, I was either almost 20 or 20 years old. My life had pretty much only been abuse. I didn't know anything other than abuse. And so I felt like my life wasn't worth living. And I had planned to take my life. But a girl who had ran in our circles, and she said there was a party and did I want to go to it? And so in my mind today, I laugh thinking how ridiculous it was. But at the time I thought, oh, one more party, I'll go to it and then I'll end my life. And so I ended up going to that party, but felt very disconnected from everybody, was just sad and pretty much sitting by myself while everybody was drinking and doing drugs and just having a good time. I was not. All I was thinking, I wanted to get back to my house and I wanted to end my life. But I had a guy who came up to me and he said, are you okay? You look like you need help. And I said, I don't need your help. And I knew I wanted no men in my life. And he goes, are you sure? Because you look like you need help. And I said, no, I don't. And so he wrote his number on a piece of paper and gave it to me and said, if you change your mind, call that number. and I just crumpled it up and stuck it in my pocket. Obviously, back then there wasn't cell phones or anything. So when I left the party and went home, I had the drugs laid out. And this was not like immediately after the party, it was within a few months. I had continuously been trying to get myself to take my life. The night I decided I would, I kept hearing this voice that I felt in my head saying to call the number. And I didn't. I argued with that feeling to call the number. No, I don't want any help. I don't want anybody. But I kept having that urge and feeling like I heard that voice in my head. And so I ended up looking for the number, found it, and I ended up calling. And the voice on the other end, I said, "You met me at a party not that long ago. You asked if I ever needed help to call, and I do need help." And so he said, "Would you like to have coffee at a cafe?" And I said, "Yes." And so we met at a cafe and had coffee and just talked. I didn't tell him everything that had happened to me, but I told him I was just coming out of an abusive relationship and I didn't know where to go or what to do next. That man's name is Carl, and we have been married for 41 years this month. And so I know at that time God intervened in my life. And even though he at the time wasn't walking with God, he had been raised in the church, and he truly saw something in me I didn't see in myself. And he truly, with a kind heart, wanted to help me. I just didn't trust men and I didn't trust anything and I didn't know of God. And it took us really, honestly, 3 years for me to trust him. And I tried my best to get rid of him, thinking eventually the shoe's going to drop and he's going to abuse me like everybody else has. But it never did. And he just continued, no matter what I did or how I acted, or if I acted crazy or whatever I did, he still stayed and continued to love me unconditionally. And I thought, what is wrong with this guy? There's something wrong with him. He's not normal, because I didn't know what real good men should look like. And after the 3 years, we ended up getting married. I was told that I would never be able to have children because of the damage that had been done. But I do have two beautiful daughters, and I have 6 grandchildren now. And we have done everything together. So he became a pastor, and we have our organization, Love Missions Global, where we help victims of human trafficking, but also just help people all over the world. And so I believe God knew what he was doing when he put us together. I did have to go through counseling and get the help that I needed to be able to be where I am today. Of course, Carl was the strength, I guess, the rock at the time that walked me through that journey. And then I did get counseling. At the time my girls were about the age that my trauma had started, I had a nervous breakdown because I had never dealt with that trauma. I was actually put into a mental hospital for 3 months. And that's where I actually started doing the work, where they showed me what had happened to me, explained what had happened to me, because all through my life, that was normal life to me when I was a kid. I just thought it was normal. I didn't understand other people had lived differently than me, even though I was trying my best to make sure I was raising my girls, protecting them and helping them to be healthy young children, something I didn't have. I think that pressure, because I didn't really even know what that all looked like, helped. And because I hadn't dealt with the trauma, brought me to where I was. But through that counseling, it did what it needed to do and helped me get to the next part of my journey.
What an amazing transformation. It shows the power of having those safe and nurturing relationships in our life,
Yeah.
the power of a therapeutic relationship, what it can do, and of
Yes.
course, your faith journey, how that has played such an important role in your life. And it's that whole connection of mind, body, and soul,
Yes.
and an overall creating everything from scratch and rebuilding that life again.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me, I just want to go back a little
Okay.
and just clarify when you were in that transition period, when the person that you were living with went to jail and you were on your own, how did you support yourself?
I did get a little job in a grocery store. I did get a job and was trying my best. I wasn't making much money enough to be able to support myself for a long period of time, but I was trying to, and I wouldn't always show up at work. This happens a lot with survivors trying to stable yourself and to understand like how to work a job, whether it's 9 to 5 or whatever it is. When you haven't done that, life has been chaotic. You don't know how to show up every day because whenever you're having that mental block, dealing with the trauma, the emotional, mental issues, you won't show up, not go to work because you don't know how to deal with living normal life. And so I was in that pattern of, yes, go to work one day, yes, call in sick the next, whatever it was, because I didn't understand what life was really like. I had lived in that same life for just about 20 years of my life, and I didn't know what real life looked like. People work jobs. I was trying because I knew I needed to bring money in, but I wasn't doing it well.
So, when you got married, when Carl came into your life, from there till the nervous breakdown, you didn't have any counseling support.
Mm-mm. No,
It was
what I had tried to do is shove it down and really honestly pretend like it never happened. And I just wanted people to think I was normal because deep inside me, I didn't feel like I was normal, like a normal person. But I thought if they ever knew who I was or where I came from, people would judge me. And so I was afraid of people to know about my past. And I tried to hide it as well as I could. Even though I got anorexia, there was things that I was doing to try to deal with the trauma, but I didn't know I was doing it because of the trauma, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was just a pattern of protection and trying to help myself and really destroying myself. I literally, when I went into the mental hospital, it was because of the anorexia. And I had gotten down to 70 pounds and I hadn't eaten in 40 days. And when I got taken to the hospital, they immediately had to stabilize my body first because some of my organs were starting to shut down. And then once my body was stabilized, they knew they had to figure out what was going on in my mind. And so that's when I got transferred to the mental hospital and they started working on, okay, this is a symptom. The anorexia is a symptom of something more. We got to find out what the more is. And that was in my 30s.
So, did Carl know the details of your background?
He didn't know every detail because I didn't even know every detail. So I had shared with him, I had shared about when I was 4 years old. That part had been embedded into my mind. And still today, I can tell you what the wallpaper looked like. I can tell you crazy details of that moment. But then between four and the rest and the ongoing trauma, it's like my mind, there was little pieces I could remember, but a lot of it was blocked out because I learned later, I didn't know at the time that your mind will do that to protect you.
Dissociate yourself so that you don't feel the pain.
Yes. Yeah. So I didn't know all that then. I was just living that. And so once I was in the hospital and they started helping me, then a little more pieces of the puzzle is how I feel started coming together. I started to remember more things and still not everything. And still today, I don't remember everything. I feel like as my life has continued on, God has let me remember the things that he knew I could handle in the time that as my life has gone on, I think he's brought to mind the things that he knew I was now able to handle it and work through it. And so as things progressed, then I shared more with my husband. But he had to be a part of all that with me too, because I would wake up in the middle of the night screaming and crying at the beginning, especially thinking I was back in those moments in my dreams. So he had to be there he would just touch me and tell me it's not today, you're okay, and remind me that I wasn't back in my childhood, that today I'm safe. As time went on, I was able to help myself with even those things by using the five senses. It's a way of helping you bring you back to reality and
Yes.
know that you're not in that trauma anymore.
Just touching, feeling things, and
Yeah,
getting connected to what's around you can bring you back.
it can. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when things trigger me now, because still I can have a smell or a song or be at a place and I don't even know. And all of a sudden it triggers me of something in the past. But today, thank God I'm able to say, okay, why am I feeling this way? Because at first I'll feel all anxious and I am upset and I'm like, why am I upset? This doesn't make sense to me. But I can now say, okay, why am I feeling this way? Let's think about this. And I can walk myself through it. And I might remember why. Oh, yeah, I do remember this happened to me, or I was locked in a closet. And when I went into that dark space, it reminded me of that. I can bring that memory up now and walk myself through it. It doesn't affect me like it did, but it's lifelong, dealing
It's a
with.
part of you. We can never forget that, in the sense, those images, those memories, they will always be there, but we learn to deal with them
Yeah.
and they don't hurt us. We learn strategies and tools
Yes.
to protect us so they don't affect us in the same way as they did at one point of time.
Yes, exactly.
But as I'm hearing your story, what a role Carl has played in your life.
Yes.
I guess even he wouldn't have understood what's going on with you. It would be so new for him also, not know what to do, how to support you,
Yeah.
and what would help. So he did it best, but he definitely did some good stuff with you. And the patience. I think it requires so much patience and calmness just to be with you, to be
Mhm.
present with you.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of strength altogether.
Yeah.
And was it ever a time that you mentioned that it took you a while to form that trust with him, to build
Mhm.
that trust, and then ultimately, of course, you did get married. But did it ever affect your married life in any way? And what did you do about it if it did?
Yeah, I think there were times we both thought this is just too hard, especially in the beginning. It's not that way anymore, but in the beginning, this is just too hard. It would be easier for us both not to be together. But because of our faith, it was never an option. So for us, it was never an option. When we were having our hardest time, we would talk to each other about, yeah, it seems like it would be easier if we just gave up. But we never gave up on each other, and divorce was never an option in our lives. We would talk to each other when we were young and say, divorce is not an option. We will work through this, because I wanted to break the legacy of my past because it had been generational. And I wanted that to end with me and to be able to help have a new generation of healthy people. And it would start with me, and then it would go on to my children, and then my children's children. And it's happened. My daughters are very healthy, beautiful girls, and they're amazing mothers. And I'm so thankful because I'm very present in their lives. We both are, as grandparents, because I think generationally, not only having a healthy parent, which I didn't get to have, healthy grandparents, I didn't have. Those generation of your little village of family is so important to make healthy people. We need all of our family to show us and feel loved no matter what we're doing. And so now, as I tried my best. I didn't know how to be a mom. I had no example. I just would pray and ask God to help me. And if there was ever a time that I felt like I can't make it, or the thoughts of, because my mom would, if I did anything, she would beat me and do terrible things to me. And that's generational. It can be passed down onto your children. So if ever I felt that way, I would feel those feelings to want to, and I would just go in the bedroom and say, Lord, I don't want to continue this on with my own children. And so I was able to do that and never hurt them. And they would tell you today that I was an amazing mom, very present in their lives, probably overprotective, but they understand why I was now. If they wanted to do cheerleading, then I had to be the cheerleading coach, because then I had to see that they were safe, whatever it took to make sure my children were safe. And now it's the same with my grandchildren. I have them all the time, and we do special little things with them, like we did Christmas with the Clauses, and I had them spend the night, and we did all these fun activities. And I try really hard. I want them to see that their grandparents love them, and that we're bringing this whole new, beautiful, healthy people into this world now.
Well, yeah. What an amazing story. I know you've mentioned your faith a few times, and tell us, how did it all begin?
So once Carl and we lived together, because I wasn't going to be with anybody that I couldn't get away from. And to me, in my mind, marriage meant you were stuck with somebody and trapped. That I had been trapped enough from people. And so I did not want to marry anyone. And so for the 3 years that we were together, and I was learning to trust him and we were working through being together, he started, because he was raised in the church. He had said, I love you and I want us to have a life together, but I think God is missing in our lives. And so I didn't know really anything about God. We lived in the country, probably 30 miles from the closest store. And there was a little church in that community. They were all farmers, and it was a little white church, a tiny little church. And the people, when they came, they were in their overalls because they had been working on the farm before they came into church. And the people in that church just embraced me with love. And I didn't know what that looked like before this. They taught me how to can and make jams and quilt and just loved me. And so we told the pastor that we wanted to become part of the church. And he just said that, you're living together and God would want you to be married. And then he also said, but have you ever accepted Christ? He talked to me about it. And I said, oh no, I haven't. And so he walked me through that. And I did want to live my life differently than I could ever know. And that looked like the way to go for me. And so I accepted Christ, and then we got married and have been part of the church and part of walking out that faith journey ever since. And I always knew if I survived my past, because there were many times I didn't think I would survive it, that I would want to help others, and I would want to help others to find the hope that I did. And I would want to help them see that no matter where you've come from, and it doesn't have to be trafficking, it doesn't have to be domestic violence, but whatever your past has come, you don't have to be defined by your past. Like I don't think you can come through any kind of trauma without having a strength beyond what others could ever imagine. And in that strength, that's what's kept you alive, and you can do anything. Anything is possible for you. And so I believe that with all my heart. I know that God helped build that strength into me. And now I want to also share that with others.
Our past fuels what we do. It becomes the very nature of our being, especially when people have gone through such severe trauma, and when they recover, it becomes a passion, a project.
Yeah,
And
because we can
that's what,
either be stuck in it, we can either be
yeah,
stuck and continue on that life, or we can say, no, we want to use what happened to us and do good in the world.
exactly, exactly. So, when you finally started therapy, how long a journey it was till you started feeling a little, let's say, normal or
Yeah, overcoming, dealing with the trauma, learning the tools that I had once when I was in the hospital, continuing on therapy after that. It was probably another 2 or 3 years that I stayed constant. I still do have mentors and people who help me still today. If there's a time I feel like I'm stuck in a place, then I have people that I can reach out to and they'll help me with that. But yeah, so 2 or 3 years after that. And then I started probably in 2000, I think it was in 2000, we started leading mission trips, because in that time I was not still telling anybody about my life. And so we started doing trips because I wanted to help people. And so I wanted to go places where people were hurting and be able to help them. And that was really bringing food and clothing and helping them with their immediate needs, and then sharing how God had impacted my life.
yeah.
And so we did that for quite a long time.
Okay. So, how did this journey of Love Missions start? It's first tell us a little bit about Love Missions, what you do, how you are working in the area of human trafficking, and how did that journey begin?
Like I said, once I started feeling healthy and that I could help other people, I had gone on a few mission trips because my daughters at the time were teenagers and they wanted to go on a trip. So I didn't, again, want them to go without me. And so I signed up to go on a trip with them. And it was on that first trip that I really felt God was saying that I was supposed to do something like this and help people, because it was always in my heart from a young age. And so after that first trip, I talked to my husband. He wasn't fully on board. The pastor that I had gone on the trip with, I said, how do I get my husband to want to do what I feel like I'm supposed to do? And he said, you can't you can't force your husband to do anything, but you can pray for him. And if it is from God, then you two will come together on this. And so I said, okay. And I started praying about that because it had radically changed my life and my girls' lives that trip. So I started praying, and it wasn't even a whole year before my husband went on a trip. And he only went because it was called an adventure mission trip. So it was like canoeing and going into the mountains and hiking, and it sounded really fun to him. So he decided, oh, okay, I'll sign up for this mission trip. But God did some miracles on that trip for him. And when he came back, he said, yes, this is what we're supposed to do. So that's when we formed Love Missions. Like I said, it was about in 2000. And we started doing destinations and bringing people along with us. We would lead the trip to different destinations and go and bring hope to the people that we came to help, and continue to do that. And again, I was not sharing my story. So it felt like I was doing what I was supposed to do because I was helping people and meeting their immediate needs and trying to encourage them and give them hope and let them know that God loved them and we were there because God sent us. And that continued on until I think 2005. I met a young girl who had been trafficked by her mom also. And that was the changing of everything and the direction of Love Missions. We still today do trips, but through that experience with her, I saw that we were able to bring hope to her, that my story in particular, because she had tried to commit suicide and was in the hospital. And I was brought there to pray for her. She was only 13 at the time. And she had been sold by her mom at 7 years old for 25 American dollars. So she said she didn't have hope and she just wanted to die. And as soon as she got out of the hospital, she was going to finish what she had already started. And I talked to her and said, I believe God has a plan for your life, just like he did for my life. And she said nobody would ever marry her in their country and in that area. People knew what had happened to her. And she said, no husband, no man will ever want to marry me. She was only 13. And that was already her biggest fear. And she had been with the other man as his sex slave and labor slave. And so she didn't know how to read or write. She didn't feel like there was any hope for her, which I completely understood. And so that I told her, I'm going to share my story with you. And I shared about my life. And today I would not be in this country by her bedside if God wouldn't have intervened in my life. And I believed I'm not anybody special at all, that the plan he had for me, he can have for her too. And so we asked the pastor we were working with if he would help her. We would help him pay. And I was hoping I could find a safe house or something that she could go into. But he took her in, and then we got tutoring and all the things for her. And today, she's incredible. She runs her own business and she is married to an amazing man and she's doing remarkable. But in that moment, when we started our first journey with her of helping her, I saw how only because she heard my story and because she heard that I made it through and that she could too, how impactful that story was for her. I knew then that, okay, I need to share this part of my life because I want others to know this too and that they can make it out of this. And so that began the journey of not just doing mission trips, but fighting human trafficking. And so from that point on, that's what we've done. We've helped, I can't even tell you how many women, so many women all over the world. Today we have a headquarters that is in Sanford, Florida. We opened a coffee shop in 2015, and we did that as a social enterprise to help fund our nonprofit. And that coffee shop has been open for 9 years now, and it is doing great. A year ago, opened a boutique, and that was a dream from me going on these trips and seeing women who were working so hard to make a craft, whether it was a Navajo Nation making jewelry or it was in a village in South America weaving baskets. They worked so hard to make these crafts to provide for their families, but they didn't have people to sell it to. And we would buy it. We'd buy everything we could to help them. But then we left and didn't come back for a year. And I was in my heart, I was like, gosh, there's got to be a better way than this. And so it just happened. This has been probably a 15-year hope and plan, but we opened a boutique that is selling jewelry and baskets and from Indonesia. We have women from all over the world now that are selling their things in our boutique, and it's a way for me to help them all year long. Plus, local people, single moms. We are just, it's called Elevate Her, and it is to elevate women and encourage them. And then we have a life center. The life center is a place where survivors can come and we help them back on their journey. So after they've gotten out of a safe house and they're gone through their therapy and they're ready for their next steps, that's where we step in and we help them either go back to school if they have a dream to be a nurse or whatever their dream is. And sometimes they don't even know what their dream is because they haven't been able to even dream. So we help them to dream and we help them to see what they want to do with the rest of their life. And we walk that journey with them. There's so many things that we do in the Life Center, and there's counseling and therapy and mentorship and just walk with them to success. And we're getting ready to open a drop-in center, which will be a place where once the survivor is taken off the street, they normally will stay at the jail or they'll be put in a hotel while they're processing paperwork to get them into a safe house. So I'm working now with the police and other local agencies that they can come to us and not be in those terrible environments so that we can be there to just comfort them. It will only be like 24 to 36 hours while they get everything ready for them to be put into the safe house, but they can be in a safe environment with someone encouraging them to start that new step in life. So those are some of the things that we are doing.
So help me understand the process. How does it work when somebody is recognized? Okay, I guess the police intervenes,
Yes.
the right to take them out.
Yes.
Uh, and then once they are out, so you're saying that they either stay in jail or in the hotel while their paperwork is processed.
Right. Yep.
And and then they go to a safe house.
Yes.
Yeah. How long do they stay in the safe house?
So in a safe house, they will stay anywhere from 12 to 18 months. Usually that's pretty normal. And that is them being in a safe place, learning to live life differently than what they've been living. Really, it's that is the deepest transformation. Sometimes it's getting off drugs because usually traffickers will put them on drugs to be able to control them better. So they may need to be detoxed first. And then obviously, if you're addicted to drugs, you can't even start on the mental part that they're going to need. So they get detoxed and then they start mentally getting the help that they need and walking through their trauma and getting, so it's 12 to 18 months of them just working with them every single day and learning to live life without being trafficked, learning to live life without selling your body for sex every single day, and learning, what it's like to not be beat because you didn't come up with the right quota or whatever it may be. So they've got to learn even learning to cook or how to take care of themselves. All the basic things are done while they're in the safe house, mentally
Yes.
and physically.
So normally, what's the age group of these young ladies?
So in our country, we do have children's safe houses. So if they've been trafficked as a child, they will immediately be put in. It wouldn't be what I'm talking about. They will immediately be put in a safe place because they are children, but 18 and over. So it's 18 and over that I work with because it's a lot harder. There's a lot more things you need to do if it's a child, even though my heart is for children. So I do education and stuff because that's where I was as a child. But we do have a safe house in South America that has children in it. So we have 5 children right now that we brought out of the sex trade that were being trafficked by their father.
And you don't have a safe house here in the.
Not in the US. We will have the emergency shelter. And then we also are getting ready to open Restoration Center, which would be even after kind of some of the things that I'm talking about, but they need a little more time. They need time to work a job and still have a safe place and an environment that people are still working and encouraging them. Because sometimes after they get out of the safe house, they're not really ready to get back into the world. And sometimes the cycle will restart because they might have records because the trafficker has put them out to sell drugs or records for prostitution because they were forced to sell their bodies. And if that's the case, they have to get their records expunged. And so when they go to get a job, one of the first things that are asked is, have you been arrested? And if they have, a lot of jobs won't hire them. And so where do they go and what do they do if that happens? They'll go back to what they knew. And so we don't want that to happen. So we're trying to
So,
break that cycle.
they can get that record clear.
Once they are knowing that it was a trafficking situation, and we do work with the Justice Department to help them get their records cleared. But it is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But yes, they can get their records expunged and it'll be cleared for them to have a clean slate to start life.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So your particular organization is called Love Missions Global, right?
Yes.
Because I was Googling it, and every time I just would just type Love Missions, and there is another organization by that name.
Some of our things, if you put Love Missions, we will come up, and sometimes Love Missions Global will come up, but some people just take off the global and it will go to Love Missions. But yeah, it is Love Missions Global.
And based out of Stanford,
Yes.
Florida.
Yeah.
For people who are, let's say, in the US, it's still advanced, but in developing countries, when women are still caught up or in a situation like this, or even outside, even if they're not trafficked, but life can take a toll and there can be other traumatic incidences in your life. What can somebody do if they don't have the resources that we are talking about? How can they help them support themselves? Or it's a
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I wish there was like such a simple answer, but they need to connect with somebody that can help them get the resources. If they're in an abusive relationship, that's a whole different story because it's hard to break yourself away from that. There's many reasons, financially, fear, so many, whether it's trafficking or domestic violence, they still are the same type of things. Women are, once they're in those situations, or even men, because boys and men are trafficked and abused also. But when you're in that situation, there's a control over you and you don't know how to break from that control because it's been there and someone else is controlling your thoughts, your whole body, your whole life. And so you don't know how to break from that. But if you can ever get to somebody that you trust that can help you to get the resources that you need so that you can be protected, that's the first thing that you need to do. There are numbers out there and we can put them, the things, we can post the human trafficking hotline, we can post domestic abuse hotline, we can post the children's abuse hotlines, we can post those things out there. And if someone would get the opportunity to make that call, there will be people to help them. In my circle, I didn't know how to look. I was a child, so I didn't know how to look for that help. And even if someone, people ask me that, if someone asked you if you needed help when you were a kid, would you have told them? And I don't know. I don't know because I was so scared. What if I told, but I still stayed with my mom? My mom would tell me, if you tell anybody, there's going to be trouble. And I think there's already trouble. Like I'm already feeling a lot of terrible things. So if it's going to be worse than this, I don't want that to happen. And so out of fear, you don't tell. But I would say today, ask. And if you see somebody that you think is in a terrible situation, like my husband saw me, just ask. And maybe no, maybe they won't tell you, maybe they're too afraid, but maybe they will. And if they do, you can help them get the resources to get out of that situation. But if you never ask, there's never going to be a chance, you know. So point them in the direction, help them, whatever you can do to get out of the situation. I wouldn't say if you saw someone on the street with a trafficker or a pimp or somebody and you're like, oh, I'm going to go rescue that girl. No, don't do that. Never do that. If you think it's a trafficking situation, call the hotline, call the police. If you see someone being beat literally in front of you, you need to call 911 first and then let the police handle that situation. Don't ever try to handle a bad situation yourself because then you're going to get yourself also in a bad situation.
That's good advice. And I think even for somebody who's hearing who is in a bad situation, I think it's important to identify what can we term safe. Because initially somebody can pretend to be safe, but is actually not, just
Yes,
to win
it
your
takes a
trust.
lot of courage and a lot of strength to
Dis-
take that first step.
yeah, and discernment
Yeah.
to see if that person is actually safe, and
Yes.
to know that if you can trust them, not just trust somebody blindly in the first incident.
Right.
And in the first encounter, but see who they are.
And
Uh,
the hotlines, if they ever get a chance to make that
Make
call,
them
the hotlines will get the people they need to.
the kind of help that they need
Yes.
and will be guided in the right way. Yeah. So, what's next for you, Tina? You're already doing so much, but I know that you have some plans for the future.
Yeah.
So, what does that look like?
My hope is to be able to be bringing in enough money that I can hire survivors. I want to be able to hire them so they don't have to just go out and hope for to get a job, that I can help them start that first part of the journey. So that's one thing. The second thing is that I would love to have land and tiny houses, or even a house where I can have survivors live here locally, because I have a survivor right now that needs a place to live. And housing is the worst. It's not affordable today. We all know that. And
Yes.
somebody who doesn't have a job and is trying to get their life back on track, they have to have safe shelter. You're not going to ever move forward if you don't have a safe place to live. And so locally, I really have a desire to have property to build. In my head, my dream is to build tiny homes where I can help a whole bunch of people and they could live independently. But even a house where they could have a room and start building themselves up to get out on their own and get that job and start making that money so that they can get out on their own is what I would really love to do. And so that's my biggest heart passion right now. And my hope is that someone would want to come alongside me and help make that dream come true so that we can get more women and out successfully to live a healthy, happy life.
That sounds amazing. I think that will be, yeah. And we just hope that we can spread the word and, yeah, somebody might come forward
Would
to
be
help you
amazing.
with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know the transformation that I've seen in women, but then the roadblock of not having a safe place is there. And so we need long-term housing so that they can, continue their healthy journey and continue to feel safe and continue to build that confidence in themselves by working a job and learning how to go to it every day and learning that, yeah, there's going to be difficult people, but they're not traffickers. You're going to learn to deal with people. And that's all a process in itself. And so we can be there if we have a safe place for them to live, we can walk that journey with them so that they can continue that on and then one day have their own place and be successful out there.
How do you look back at it all, Tina?
I wish it never happened. I wish I didn't have to live this journey, honestly, and deal with the trauma that I still have to deal with today. But I am thankful that I'm able to use it for good today. I am thankful that I can see how my past has helped me with my future and that has helped me to be the person I am today. Without those things, I wouldn't be who I am. I probably wouldn't have the compassion I have in my heart and the love for people to help and make a difference in their lives. So I know with all things, they can be used for good. And no matter where you've come from or what you've been through. So I would say I look at the past today with thankfulness that I can use it for good and to bring hope to others.
That only a person who's recovered and healed and gone through the journey, all the steps in the journey, can say such something like this. Would you have done something differently?
Do you mean when I was young or today?
That you didn't have control over, but I guess as you started building your life again, and were there some lessons that you learned, maybe mistakes you made, and you learned from them and moved on?
Probably, I would think believing in myself, having courage to speak out sooner. I didn't have courage and lived in fear for a big portion of my life. Even when I was married, I still had fear of people, not trusting people. And we know still today, trust is still an issue for me today because then you build friendships. No matter what you do, you are in relationships with people and people can hurt you. And so whenever that happens, and that's part of life, I know that moment makes me feel like, oh, here we go again. People are only in your life to hurt you. But I know that's not the truth and that this is part of life and we have to continue to strive and thrive in life. And so we can continue to overcome. So I would say, I wish I would have had that strength that's in me now to have that courage to start younger and have that voice at a younger age, because I'm 64 now. And so I think of all the things I could have done when I was younger to help people. But at the same time, I had to walk that journey to get healthy so that I could do the things.
There are times when we can be our hardest critics and say,
Yeah.
oh, I could have done this. But I guess you also needed that time to heal and recover, as you said, to have that strength to do the work that you're doing, because it's not easy. The work that
No,
you're doing is not
not
easy.
easy.
Yeah,
No. And it brings up even those things in yourself that you've had to deal with. And so at the same time, you understand so you can help them, but it's a tough journey for sure.
it's a tough
Especially
journey.
especially when somebody goes back and you're like, no, don't. It hurts your heart so bad because you know that there's so much better for them. But they've got to be ready to take that step
Take
and
that
work
step.
and fight for themselves.
Because through them, you're living your past also over and over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And if it's hard for them, it's doubly hard, I think, for you
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
Uh,
There are times for sure.
yeah. Any advice that you would like to give to somebody who is in a difficult situation, either in trafficking or otherwise, somebody who's going through trauma?
Yeah, I think living with trauma is hard, especially when you're in the midst or just coming out of it to try to figure out what life is going to be. I would say you need to get help to help someone walk that journey with you. I definitely believe in mentorship. Therapist, for sure. Have a therapist, but also have a mentor that's maybe already come through that journey, because even with therapists, they're amazing to help you mentally with things, but they haven't lived that experience. So when you're with somebody that's lived the experience the same as you, I think it opens up your heart a little more that they're not just telling you things to tell you things, even though we need the therapist to help us think logically and get the tools that we need to walk through it. Also, a mentorship is such a good thing to have because they have walked the journey already before you, and they can help walk you through that journey and give you advice on how they made it to where they're at. Don't give up on yourself. You're going to have hard times when you feel like giving up and that you can't overcome this, but you can. You're here today. So that means you have strength in you to make it to where you've been today. You've overcome so much, and you now can draw on that strength that kept you alive and kept you through this time. You can draw on that strength to walk out that healthy journey. Don't give up on yourself. Yes, we all have bad days. I still have bad days, but now I know how to work through those bad days, and you can too.
Thank you, Tina. Those are great words to end the podcast. And I'd like to thank you again for your time. And you've shared such a, of course, your story is so inspirational. But along with that, you've shared so many resources and tools that people can use and come to a place to get healthy again.
Yes, yes. And thank you for the opportunity, and especially January's Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And this is going to bring awareness to people. And if they need help, get help. And if they don't need help, they can come alongside an organization financially or volunteer or whatever it may be. But everybody can do something.
If you found the content valuable, please like, share, and subscribe and spread the word. I feel the best compliment is being referred, that one action of yours can help us reach more people and fulfill the mission of thriving changes. Thank you for considering.